This is Kimon Onuma in BIM Storm Enlighten, Revit from Program to BIM. In previous sessions, we auto-generated these spaces from Program to BIM or SEPs to BIM from an owner's database to generate spaces and equipment. Now we're going to export these to Revit. Plugins are available for different applications. We'll select the Revit plugins as well as the object families that need to go into Revit. Once these are installed in Revit, you can import the BIM XML file that was just generated from the web and auto-generate the spaces and equipment in alignment with the data that came from the owner's requirement database. Select the file that was saved out, import. Depending on the file's size and the size of your processor, import times will vary. You can select with walls or without walls. We're going to select separation lines, and this will import and align the requirements with the models that generate in Revit. Some errors will come up, and usually you can ignore those. Those are duplicate mark values in Revit. Now in Revit we're seeing the floor plan with the room stamp, the name that came from the owner's database, the 3D view of the objects and the families. They have bounding boxes, so we can turn off the bounding box to reveal the actual object, the geometry of it. Each of the objects has the attributes that came over from the owner's database automatically populated into the objects. And now it's ready for the designer to actually start using this to resolve the design. This can be seen as a program requirement model auto-generated within the first few minutes of an owner handing the requirements over to the design team. The design team can now look at this and evaluate how to lay out the spaces and how to design the building around this, and to even look at the layout of the space. Is it big enough, for example? So for example, this particular office, the designer might say, okay, let's move this piece of equipment over, and even move the space over and start doing a quick blocking and stacking exercise. Each BIM application obviously has its own way of working. So for example, in Revit, in this case we moved the space over, but there were some objects that were above the cutting plane, these objects off to the side. So the depth clipping and the view range has to be edited. So this is more of a Revit function of making sure that you're viewing all of the objects. If the offset's at 7'6", you might need to increase it to 9 feet to actually be able to view and edit objects that are up higher in the ceiling. And here we see two objects that were moved over.